The future is here, and it might not involve flying cars, but this NVMe is literally a spaceship. Good afternoon and welcome to Turbo Tortoise Tech. In front of me is that MP600 PRO XT variant of Corsair's Gen 4 NVMe's that's promising 7,100 megabytes read and 5,800 megabytes write. So imagine my surprise when I plugged it into a B550 motherboard and I saw it peaking at 3,800. The reason for that is because your boy derped and he forgot that G series processors actually only have PCI Express 3.0, and this is actually a good case for you to buy an X series chip, is because then you get PCI Express 4.0 and then you won't derp the way that I did. And the derping didn't stop there either. This has been the most overworked review pretty much of my entire life, because I then went to put it into my main system, which has an X570 and a 5900X. Thumbs up for that, right? Because that's going to give me that PCI Express 4.0. It's also got 32 gigs of 3600 megahertz CL18 memory. All the right things you want to see around a Ryzen platform. Except then I took my OS drive out at much pains because it sits underneath my fat boy GPU, and put this in, and then it booted to this because I'd already installed Windows on the other system, and then because I wanted to put like CS in a game to do like more of a real world test in gaming to see what the drive would perform like there, and maybe edit off of it and use some 4K footage, you know, and put some data on the drive and see how it handles. By the way, it's probably done about 150 gigs there, but all of that, I used the wrong drives and mixed them up and just had a fantastic time with things. But we have finally gotten all the benchmark data in and put it into nice graphs for you as per usual. So we'll be going through that a little bit later in the review. But let us start off with the physical product itself. So it's an 80mm drive, which is the normal NVMe. They're all going to be pretty much 80mm these days. You do get 110s and some bigger, longer boys, but I haven't really seen too much spec variants except for IOPS, of which this has like an incredibly large amount. Is about like 5 times what you'd find in a normal SSD. The reason for that is they're creating lifetime and longevity, and to that end, their expected lifetime for this is 1.7 million hours worth of operation. And if Linus's review of the older version of this drive, which also you can get this with water cooling as well, it's kind of superfluous with this much heatsink on, keeps it at like 50 degrees anyway, but you can get it with a heatsink on it. In his review, he did 22 terabytes worth of data transfer to lose 2% worth of drive quality. So that's quite heavy going, let me tell you. I will probably never use anything to that tune in like space of 2 years, even with all the 4K and everything that I'm working with at the moment. Yeah, it's nothing anywhere near 22 terabytes. So longevity, we can attest to that. There are multiple tests thereon. Cool. So what about the newer XT drive? Does it live up to the performance hype that's being created? In a nutshell, yes. Like I said, this is insanely beefy, this cooler that comes with the drive. It is so nice that it comes with it, because a lot of the time they rely on your motherboard to have cooling for that. But what if you're already using that for another drive? Then this is all in one included. Kind of like that. Because it's also significantly thick, and it actually looks quite nice as well, which is always nice if it's visible sitting there, you know, that you've got this pretty looking heatsink on top of the thing. But the main thing is the performance of that heatsink is exactly what I would expect, except even better, because it was like 50 degrees no matter what it did. And I ran crystal disk marks back to back to back to back on the thing for 40 minutes to simulate that sort of test, probably putting, I'd say, about 150 gigs through the drive in tests, and it didn't skip a beat. There was no slowdown. All of that was 10 out of 10. And now that performance compared to the E2000, which is a 512 gig with not quite as many IOPS, etc., but it's still a very, very good Gen 3 NVMe. And as I've shown you with the messed up benchmarks earlier, it's pretty much close to the limit of what you will get from a Gen 3 product. Now, the main thing is, as we go down the list of those results and stuff, you'll notice a lot of the times where there's smaller files and multiple queues for those smaller files, the performance is actually really good. And that's a good thing to see, because that's multi-threaded processing is what we're doing in this day and age. I doubt you're going to be buying a 5,000-6,000 Rand NVMe and then putting in a quad-core CPU. I really hope that's not what you're doing with your life. If you don't have an 8-core or better, with this kind of drive, you're kind of wasting your time in a way because it can handle so much more data transfer. Now, in last test, the sustained data transfer was about 2 gigs a second, which is ridiculous, 2000 megabytes a second. But you will do nothing like that in a normal desktop and in a gaming environment. A lot of the time it's burst stuff that happens. So as you, for instance, would be walking around New World and you walk into a town or a new environment, then it does a call for the graphics and for all of the textures and stuff that you need for the buildings inside of that town. Until then, it's probably not sitting in your RAM. So the quicker that can be serviced up to RAM, obviously the more fluid your gaming experience. And I can attest to that from putting CS on it. Albeit Steam doesn't really take, the most of the SSDs. In all honesty, the most I've ever seen it do is about 500 megs a second. So the real world test was in line. It's going to max out whatever Steam can do. But when it comes to loading up games and Windows and all that sort of stuff, it's insanely fast. That's exactly the kind of use case scenario you're going to be looking at. Also, if you work with a lot of 4K footage, large PSD files, vector graphics, and all of that sort of stuff, sometimes your PSD files can be in excess of 40 gigabytes. This has happened. This has been a thing since I was supporting designers in companies like 10 years ago. Okay, it's always been a thing, is the project files can often be quite large, or your raw video capture files can be exceptionally large. I, for instance, go through about 14 gigs worth of video per review. So the fact that this can drop a 4K file of like 5 gigs into a timeline and generate a peak file in like 3 seconds is kind of nuts. To edit off of this, to use big files off of this, to play games off of this drive, you are going to have an absolutely phenomenal time. Do I think it's that much better than the PCI Express 3.0s? Not really. Where they're hitting like the 3,500 overall, it's going to be quite similar in experience until you go into like really big files like 4K and that sort of stuff. If you want to put like Call of Duty 2019 on this sucker, it will like load way quicker than the Gen 3 just because it can do more large files per second. And if you like onto where cards like 270 gigs worth of large. So if you're an incredibly impatient person and you just want things to happen before you can almost think about them, then definitely look at one of these. And specifically the Corsair, like I said, the one thing I really do like is this heatsink, and it's super beefy. It's fat boy on fat boy. To give you an idea, these drives generally throttle at about 80 degrees. This was at like 51, no matter what I did to it. It just sat at like 51. So it's like nearly 30 degrees, 1 point shy. Let's call it 30 degrees under your thermal throttling point. So it will never throttle. There's no use case in the usage at home. Even if you're using it as an editing drive, it's never going to fail like 1.7 million hours. If it doesn't fail out of box in the first 3 months, it's probably going to last 1.7 million hours. 1.7 million! I mean, that's so long, Jacob Zuma probably couldn't read that whole number. Anywho, that is all I have for you in this review. If you have enjoyed it, please hit us up with a like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the flip side.